All right, let's finish this up. I wanted to say something about writing. I was thinking about this last night as I fell asleep. Um, I think some of what makes good or bad writing is not like the quality of the prose. And I sort of hinted at this in the last thing. It's kind of whether I think the author's an idiot or not. And the kind of defining feature of whether I think the author is an idiot is whether I think they're aware of what they've had the characters say and do, right? If you have a character that is clearly intended to be funny, like they're moved to for like the joke of every scene, and none of those jokes are funny, then it's not just this is missing, it's the author thinks things are funny that I clearly don't. And some of that's going to happen like if a game is aimed more for kids and you don't like the kind of kid humor, then it's like there's a good chance it's going to have a lot of, for instance, fart jokes. And if you don't find fart jokes funny, then you're going to be like this is not for me, and what they think is funny is not funny to me. But it could also be that what they think is funny is something really mean. And so I think like there are scenes with Squall where he's being mean, and how strangely he's being mean is funny. But imagine all of those were replaced by him just going, "You suck," every time someone talks to him. I think that wouldn't be funny, right? I think there's something else going on that makes some of Squall's interactions that are mean funny. But the other thing is, I think the game obviously knows he's being mean, right? The game knows this wooden, in his own head, difficulty connecting to others' characters, and his whole arc is about that, right? So it's something the game is obviously highly aware of. It knows the character it's built. And I think there are lots of characters that, for instance, just like their main thing is going, let's kick its ass, yay, violence. Where like the game doesn't really know what it's saying with that because it never takes any time to address it, right? And so there are times when a character is supposed to be funny or is supposed to be likable or is supposed to be deep. And I think if you look at what's actually being said there, it isn't that. And what they're saying isn't something they ever address because what they're saying they think is pure good. And it isn't. And this is the kind of problem I have with Bait and Kaitos' characters, and a lot of characters, is I think the writing is telling you different things about the characters than what the story thinks it's telling. And so they are writing something different than what is in their head, or they're bad people. Um, and that leads to things that I find really off putting in a game. Um, so, for instance, I think Crisis Core is an interesting addition to FF7 if you conclude Zack is terrible. If you don't conclude Zack is terrible, then you're not going to get that out of the game. But also, I think they obviously didn't conclude that, and that's why the game doesn't connect for me, right? Because I think they've set up a character that is different than the character they think they've set up. So they're going to do different things with that character than I think are the things that address what they've done with them. Um, and so that's a place where I often have disconnects from games. And it is a thing about the writing, but it's that I think the writing is conveying something different than what it wants to. As an example of an author, this is Books that I think does it really well. Um, I would not recommend this to people. It's a very like grim, dark writer, and I think in many ways he's much less sexual assault, much less. But I think in many ways much harder to take than a George R. R. Martin because he is not interested in giving you um, not just satisfying conclusions but clean conclusions. Like generally speaking, I think killing someone gives a kind of clean conclusion to their story, um, that says, here is what the arc was. And he doesn't really do that. There's lots of ways he's just much less satisfying as an author, intentionally so. But I think Joe Abercrombie is an author who he reliably, correctly knows how I'm going to be responding to his characters and works within that. He's very in control of the reader's feelings in a really impressive way. And I think a lot of these games, like, okay, Waka has his whole racism arc that's great. But like Baten Kaitos' Jabari, both like visually but also clearly in vibe, is supposed to be the same as Waka. Except if you look at what Jabari believes and says, I think it is just as vile as Waka, and the game doesn't deal with it. Well, Waka, it does. One of the reasons FF10 is a great game and Baten Kaitos is not. Okay, let's talk about games. I've tried Golden Sun stuff a little, never got into it. Uh, Kingdom Hearts is not for me. Shadow Hearts, I want to save for later. I never played the Lufias. I should play Lufia 2 at some point. Oh, I've played Lunar. I've played Lunar. What to do with Lunar? I think Lunar is a solid game. Like, I think it could very easily be in this tier of games. Except there was no point when I got, like, I was really into it. Um, I think it's, like, clearly good. It does some really nice stuff with bosses having visual cues, such that you adjust what you're doing without it having to beat you over the head and, like, have a pop up say, now the boss is going to do this. It instead, like, really nicely gives you information if you're paying attention to visual cues that let you adapt to what's going on and make a bunch of the fights pretty interesting. I didn't get into the story or characters, but I didn't think they were like badly done. It just didn't click with me. I think this is both a like generous and negative rating because it like didn't stick in my head at all, and that feels more fitting for this category. But I also think it was better executed than the stuff in the lower category. So I'm gonna put it here. I played it on Piggyman's suggestion. It was a good suggestion. It just, yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. Um, okay. Let's also delay talking about SMT games for a moment. Something I've gotten to more recently, so my thoughts are more recent. Okay, Pokemon. What do we want to say about Pokemon? I think Pokemon is well executed, and if you like fall in love with a specific Pokemon or with the world, then you should reasonably have it very high. Um, for me, it's like it's a well executed gameplay concept that never gets in its own way, and that's impressive. Like it smartly doesn't bog itself down with story. I think by the time you hit Gen 3, which is basically by the time I stopped, it starts tripping over itself a little more. Like it needs to add stuff to make it new from what it's been before. But a bunch of the things it adds are things like beauty contests, which is just something I don't want to take part in, and kind of little things that are problems. I think probably the peak is gold silver because it basically is before it starts getting bogged down and pretty evidently like I haven't followed like at all closely but like pretty evidently it gets more and more bogged down. um, and gold silver adds some nice quality of life things. The one I've played by far the most is the red blue yellow era, and it's just a fun game to pick up and play. I've enjoyed doing kind of challenge runs of things where like in the Nuzlocke direction, but like with added stuff in red blue yellow of like so Nuzlocke, if Pokemon dies, it's dead. You can only catch the first Pokemon you see per area. Also, not allowing certain Pokemon that I think are make it too easy, and also no experience gained except from trainers. I think is a fun and good restriction, and I think it's fun to play challenges of that mold. I really like Pokemon. I think basically it all belongs around 3 star, and then gets a little bogged down and falls into 2.5. But if someone had it 3.5, 4, or 5 star, I would just say, oh, that means more to you than it does to me. That's great. Good for you. Um, Suikoden I've never played. Okay, Star Ocean. Uh, we should grab a Pokemon. I just wasn't seeing where the ones I liked were. Like visually, it wasn't jumping out at me. Okay, yeah, red and blue. Let's put that in 3 star and have that be a stand-in for Pokemon. It's good. Really nicely like structured gameplay reward system, which is really nice for like just enjoying a game as it constantly kind of gives you new things. Let's even put it at the top of it. Well done, Pokemon. It makes sense you're popular. And I like you. Okay. Next up, This is in the I'd rather not have you trip over yourself than have a story that really appalls me. And Pokemon does well there. Okay, Star Ocean till the end of time. Very ugly to my eyes, like graphical design that is really, really unappealing to me. Gameplay that I found really difficult. I haven't played it for decades. Like I played it, around when it came out, and that's a long time ago. I was either really bad at it or I think it's really hard. And I think it's probably in the really hard category. Which is not to say there aren't people that are exceptionally good and are like playing it on normal difficulty. What an easy thing that would be. But I think it was a pretty hard game to get a feel for with an interesting, nicely done action combat system. And I hadn't played too many action games at that point, um, like mostly like Vice City type stuff, which is very different. So, and also there's this huge difficulty spike at some point. Um, there's definitely a huge spike around the time there's the big, ginormous, highly controversial plot twist. But I think there's a spike a little before that as well, and both of them I found just like, oh my god, this is so hard. I have to now spend hours grinding the most basic enemy that I can barely maybe sometimes win against, and then run back to the save and heal spot. Um, just a really brutal difficulty jump. Ended up hadn't done this till then, but ended up like googling guides and using that to get through the end of the game because I was struggling. Um, One of those stories that starts as a kind of battle between, well, it starts sort of cosmic resort, and then we land on this planet that is much less technologically developed, and we have a battle between kingdoms, but it expands into other things. But I think one problem is it spends so much more time on the battle between kingdoms that when it basically goes, that had no relevance to the actual story we wanted to tell. I think it doesn't quite pull it off. Also, none of the characters are very interesting, in my opinion. Um, and the gameplay doesn't super click. I think it's just like not actually very good. It's probably be here. But I did like parts of it, and I do think somewhat fondly of the gameplay system, but I tried to pick it up maybe 5 years ago for a second, which is like, oh, this feels really clunky now. Everything is just smoother in more modern games. But I think at the time, and with the games I had played, it was like, oh, this is doing something interesting and different, but also it's just clearly not very good. I think the earlier Star Oceans are probably better, but I've never played them. Um, like the opposite of Legend of Dragoon. Legend of Dragoon is a good RPG that I basically don't have good things to say about. Star Ocean is like this. No, it's kind of similar, except that the story is just worse handled. Eh. All right. We're still skipping SMT for the moment. Suikoden, I played Suikoden 4. It is obviously just not very good. Um, Everyone knows this. But I was really in the mood for an RPG when I played it, so I enjoyed it so much more than I enjoyed my time with Suikoden 3, which is why I got through 4. But it is obviously not a good game. Um, okay, not played the other ones. I know 3, 5, 2 are generally considered the best ones, so I missed them. One is also pretty reasonably well thought of, but like there are the people who love two, and then there are the people who I think like there's like kind of two or two and three, and then there's three and five people I think. And my guess is my favorite would be five, but I don't know. Okay, Tales of. So there's a split in the Tales of where there's were sort of rumors of two studios, and I think that actually is true. They're kind of two studios, and I basically don't like the games out of one of the studios. Um, so yeah, Tales of Grace's F, like the gameplay feel just doesn't click for me, and I think this is the studio where people are like, yeah, the stories are a bit kiddier, but the gameplay makes up for it. Except for me, the gameplay how to say this well. So if you compare Super Smash Brothers, the first one, to Melee, many people like Melee more. To me, Melee feels really slippery in a way where the hitboxes don't really make sense in my head. And Super Smash Bros. 1, every move and the hitbox assigned, I think, is very clear and clean from the graphics. And 2 has better graphics, smoother graphics, and slippier graphics in a way where the hitboxes don't quite click in my head and it feels not as clean or elegant or working as properly through virtue of it in some ways being cleaner and more elegant. Um, so I don't like playing Melee. It's never been enjoyable for me to play. The first one is the one that really clicks is this feels good to play, everything works. Um, I think if I played at a higher level, there would be reasons that Melee might work better. Um, the first one is a little more combo heavy, but as a player not capable of pulling off the crazy combos, being able to pull off little combos feels good. So for me, it works at the right level. And I also think I know this is obviously not the choice, but I think it's like much more interesting to watch as well, the high level players play, where very decisive actions are frequent and need to be avoided and leads to interesting things. And watching Isaiah or some other players is just really interesting. Um, and I think there's something of a thing like that going on with the Tales of games, where for me, the gameplay from the studio I like and the story are much better. The gameplay is cleaner, everything fits better and feels right to me. And this is clearly just like a aesthetic and feel preference, and I understand there will be people that go the other way. But for me, this is, oh, the gameplay doesn't really work. It feels too slippery is not quite the right word. I don't have it. It feels too something, and you've screwed up the gameplay that works so cleanly and well in other games, and the story is just annoying and obnoxious. And why does that game start with like a 2 hour prologue where you can't use the B button in combat? Just like, ugh, what are we doing here? Don't like Tales of Graces at all. One of the few games I've made it to the final dungeon. There wasn't like even a difficulty spike or anything. I was just like, oh, the final dungeon is going to be long. I don't want to do this. I don't care. And that's not a good sign for enjoyment of a game. All right. I've never played Eternia or Hearts, or Innocence, or Legendia. I have played Tales of Fantasia. Tales of Fantasia has some amusing things. There's stuff I'm kind of amused got through the censors of like start of the 90s. Um, but I think so. I have a really hot take on Zelda. I think Zelda was significantly better 2D than 3D, and basically the gameplay formula is fun in 2D and not fun in 3D. You probably disagree with me because everyone loves 3D Zelda. That's fine. My point is, I think there are games, some people have this with Mario. For me, it works in both 2D and 3D, but some people have it. No, this was the version where it felt good to play, and this is the version where it doesn't feel good to play. For me, Tales of needed to reach a different kind of graphical level to do what it was trying to do and a different control scheme. And Fantasia was an interesting first effort, but not really there yet. Um, okay, more Tales of, what do we got? Uh, this actually is probably Tales of Fantasia. No, it's on PlayStation. I'm confused. We'll ignore that. All right, Tales of Zillia. I never played Tales of Zillia 2, and I probably should have. I'm going to hold off on Zillia for a sec. This Vesperia? No, this is Abyss. Okay, let's do Abyss. Um, Abyss has a little bit of a slow start issue, but not near as much as Grace's. I made a friend play some of Grace's with me just because that was one I hadn't beaten yet, and he was like, "What is this shit?" And then we switched over to Abyss, and he was like, "Oh, this is actually just really good." And like now he has the opinion that all Tales of games are contenders for Game of the Year when they come out because he thinks, "Oh, that's just a good working gameplay system with like fun character archetypes. Just for some reason, they were completely incompetent in Graces, but any other game, like this is just obviously a good game." And I think that's basically the case. Now, Abyss does interesting things with its arc. It is risky to have your lead character, not a secondary character, but your lead character be an unpleasant jerk and obviously not be cool, right? Like Squall or Cloud, obviously they suck in many ways. And I think the game knows this. That's why I'm okay with them. But they're also gonna appeal to a lot of people as cool. So you've got these two things going on. They're on this arc, but if the viewer doesn't notice the arc, the viewer can still find them cool. And so there are going to be multiple ways the character can appeal. I talked about this so much in my FF7 playthrough. The lead character, Luke, in Tales of the Abyss, is an unpleasant loser who is also whiny. And that means no one's going to find him cool, and you have to be on board for his arc, which is going to take a long time to happen. I think that's a big risk in a game and is going to lose a bunch of people. Did it lose me? I don't think so. In part because the game obviously knew it was trying to do that. I do think, however, it took a long time to get to. And it's not like it needed to resolve in the first few hours, but it took a long time to feel like much was happening there. I think another reason I don't love this game as much as people do is people really like Jade, who is the sarcastic humor character. And he didn't like, I barely remember him. So, like, obviously, the stuff that people were really enjoying didn't click with me in the same way. But I think it's like clearly a good executed RPG. Another thing about it is it felt a little more undirected than some others. I remember just feeling at more points in the game, I don't really know where to go next. I have to check a guide now, and I don't really like that feeling. And I feel like I think I had it significantly more on this one than other Tales of games. Um, yeah, and again, it's not gonna have characters I love, so it's not gonna really pop for me in the way where to start threatening to be a 4-star game, you have to have human beings I'm really invested in. And I think it had some ambition there, but didn't make it there for me. Good game. Good game. Uh, let's find Tales of Vesperia next, which is, I think, the Tales of that I played for the first time most recently and liked. But, oh, I bounced off Zestiria really hard. Again, wrong studio for me. Um, Vesperia, there you are. So Vesperia varies from the other games in a big way that I think, in a sense, though it ruined this by being on the Xbox, gives it broader appeal, which is the main character of a Tales of game tends to be sort of in the Titus mold, in that they tend to be a bit whinier than a lot of leads and not trying to convince you they're cool. This one has a cool lead. And I think for a lot of people, that would really help with the Tales of thing. They're not kind of either young and with all the stuff that comes with being young, they're more world weary and cool. And I think that really gives it opportunities to appeal to an audience that a bunch of the Tales of games would struggle for. If you look at like the male lead, you can choose which lead you want to follow. What's his name? Jude? Let's say Jude in Tales of Zillia. Like, you're never gonna think he's cool. And I really think it helps appeal to a lot of audience if you can possibly think they're cool. And Tales of Abyss, Tales of Zillia, many tales, Tales of Symphonia, it's hard to get there. And I think you're there quickly in this one. And then it adds a lot of kind of whimsy's the wrong word. Like chaotic oddness with the first boss that kind of throws off that vibe a little. The female lead is very much Colette again. It's a very archetypal series. It really runs out similar archetypes, but it did something different with the lead this time, and I think it did it well, and that was nice. Um, I didn't like it. Basically, I believe, if I'm remembering it right, it basically switched the X circle or X square interaction to like switched X and circle to square and X, And I don't think there was a way to change that, and that kind of annoyed me because it threw off my standard play in the series a little bit, or for at least for a bit. I don't know why you'd make that switch of what the control scheme is for a well-worn and well-used control scheme. It's not like putting shooting on the trigger buttons or something like that. It's just like, why am I pressing different buttons to do what I want to do? I don't know why I don't love it. I feel like it should be one of my favorites, and it definitely isn't. I think I probably have it right where I have Abyss, and I have two Tales of, I think, are a lot better. Something about the pacing. I did play halfway through and then just stop and come back to it later, and that's pretty rare for a game I'm really enjoying. I don't know. It's good. I feel like I should have it in the 3.5, and I can't do it. I don't click enough with it. And sometimes that's all you have to say. Doesn't need to be a better reason than I think what it was doing was good, and I did not click with those things. That's okay. That can happen. I like when you can be like, I love this thing. I also think it's bad. I hate this thing. I also think it's good. Doesn't have to be that strong. I never played Undertale. Maybe I'll play Undertale someday. Okay. The big two for Tales for me are Zillia, which I've suddenly completely lost track of. There you are. Zillia. Um, Everything on a quality of life front I thought worked so well here that it was just an enjoyable, good time to play. I don't think like the writing's great, though I don't think it's a problem. I don't think the story and twists are great. I think part of it kind of just does Symphonia again, which most of the games do. Um, I don't know. I just had a lot of fun playing this game. And once I beat it, I wanted to play it again and main a different character, which is always a nice thing in Tales of games that you can do that. So I ran through it with Alvin as my main, and I might have ran through it again with someone else, though I don't think so. Archetypally, it's doing just a ton of things Symphonia did before, but it's doing them the kind of Abyss and Vesperia on that front are in a sense more ambitious because it's not rerunning Symphonia and it's varying quite a bit with its leads from Symphonia archetypes. This feels more in like if you look at a whole bunch of characters in the party, rerunning Symphonia plot elements. But I love Symphonia. Symphonia is great. Symphonia is for me the best in the series. I understand people thinking later games passed it because later games work from the framework it built, and you could certainly think they do it better, and that would be reasonable. For me, they don't quite get there. And Symphonia has this really nice thing to it. Part of it is that my favorite character in the series by far is from Symphonia, and that will always leave me more attached to something. And that character is, giving you time to guess, it's Zelos. I think one of those things about being funny and moving to pathos working really hits for me with him. But I also I really like him conceptually as an archetype, which is take a person. I'm gonna put it here. Um, Take a person who is told from their youth that they are the chosen one, and they are going to have to do the things to save the world. And instead of having the person grow into it, they hate it. They don't want to be it. They don't want to have to, give themselves up for the world. They don't want to have to devote their life for this. And so instead, they make jokes and they chase women and they try to be something else so they don't have to think about it. And I think they pulled that off really well with Zelos, and I really enjoy him as a character. And yeah, really clicks for me. I love Symphonia. Best of the Tales of series. Well done. And you'll note how many games that aren't Final Fantasy have I gotten up to this tier? It's Chrono Trigger and Tales of Symphonia. Well done, Tales of Symphonia. And nothing else has been all that close. We may break in with some other games, but yeah. Trails in the Sky. I played Trails in the Sky 1 and 2. A lot of people love these games. I started it, and there was one line at the very start of the game that always really annoys me. And then Other than that, I think the dialogue is fun and snappy and good and reads differently despite being fun and snappy than a lot of RPGs trying to be. I think Estelle is a fun and successful lead, um, in the kind of earnest good doer, but like well executed and with a smart enough writing to pull off being more interesting than that can be. The plot does some ambitious things. I think it is weighed down by a Kingdom Hearts issue of like now you're fighting mysterious figure number six that just strikes me as dumb. Um, and for me, it didn't end up really going much of anywhere in either story or gameplay. And I know it had big developments right at the turn of the first game to the second game. And those were big, interesting developments. And I was really thinking throughout the first game, I think this is pretty good, and I'm just not enjoying it enough to keep going. And then they pulled me into the second game by doing some really interesting things. And then by the end of the second game, it was kind of, oh, all the interesting things had kind of already happened for me at the end of the first, start of the second. And not much was added to that. I don't know. I think they're good and don't click with me. And so I'm probably not going to ever continue with them, which is a bummer because I was really hoping to have like this infinite series. This is Trails in the Sky second chapter, right? Yeah, I was really hoping to have this infinite series. I like one more than two. I was hoping to have this like huge series I could explore and love and combine having something well written and good, and I think they are well written, um, well written and good that could expand forever in a way that I'll never get out of like a Kingdom Hearts series that is expansive, but I think is just bad. But it didn't work for me. That was a bummer. I was sad about that. I hope it works for you. All right, Wild Arms. I bounced off Valkyria Chronicles hard. I bounced off Wild Arms 3 pretty hard. Vagrant Story. Ooh, Vagrant Story. Oh, this makes me think because they're similar gameplays. Parasite Eve not listed here? I would put Parasite Eve here. Like, you've had a lot of games. You should have Parasite Eve on this list. Uh, let's actually just pull to the top the rest of the games I'd like to talk about. So I'm going to scroll to the bottom. Um, never played Xenoblade Chronicles. I think they look so ugly, and every review says, "Isn't this beautiful?" And I think part of it is that they see this is portable. That might be Persona 3 portable. Um, that they see the whole world, and that the like arc of what you can see in any shot is pretty impressive. But I think the actual graphics are really, really ugly looking in a similar way to finding Star Ocean ugly. Of course, if you don't find it ugly, like it will appeal. But I think it looks really, really bad. And having every review go, isn't this so beautiful as it shows something I'm like, ugh, is really, really off putting. But also, I have complex feelings about Xenos. I know those are the most kind of universally acclaimed Xenos, but I suspect I would not like them. And I suspect I would not like almost anything about them. Is this Valkyrie Profile Lenneth? I've only played Lenneth, which is a remake of 1. But I guess we'll just go with 1 here. Not a remake, like a remaster, basically. So it's basically 1, but um, nicely executed on the PSP. That will be a fun one to talk about. Sorry for the watching me try to slowly bring a game up the list. This website is both the best at what it's trying to be, this tier maker site, and also kind of a pain to use because like there should be cleaner ways to do it than this. But I don't think there are. All right, let's go back to the bottom. What else is there? No. Triangle strategy I should try. Um, I really don't think they have Parasite Eve here. I have watched all of Lost Odyssey. I think that counts. And Lost Odyssey is a game I think isn't good. Not like the worst thing in the world. Um, I remember the first scene I saw with the main villain. I was like, that's the main villain. They're doing a bad job of hiding it, and I stand by that opinion. I'm not sure they were trying to hide it. I don't remember it well. It tried to do a lot of its fancy writing and side stuff, but I thought its fancy writing, it was, it did it in a way I found a little saccharine. It's not quite the word I want. It didn't pull it off for me, and its in-game writing also it did not pull off for me. So that game didn't click for me, and the Hironobu Sakaguchi thing when he went over to the Xbox, uh, I I I felt I was missing something big, and now I don't feel I was. As I said, I did Twilight of the Spirits. Is this Twilight of the Spirits? It is. Um, I like strategy RPGs. We'll get to this in a sec. I already listed Kudelka. Why does it have games twice here? Bad job. And I don't think it has Parasite Eve. It's somewhat alphabetical here. So this is the SMT section, but it should be um, somewhere like right after Mario. And they just don't have Parasite Eve. And that's like, oh, what was I moving? I just lost what I was moving. I moved something else by mistake. The Secret of Mana. What was I moving? Hopefully we catch it again as I scroll. Um, but this list should obviously have Parasite Eve. Oh, I was moving Twilight of the Spirits. I think I started Jean d'Arc, but didn't get very far. Um, yeah, so we got to bring up all the Shadow Hearts games. Again, why do you have Kudelka shown twice? Bounced off Wild Arms. Yeah, I think we're down to Shadow Hearts, Xenosaga. Never played Yakuza Like a Dragon, but I do like Yakuza games. Um, so Xenosaga, Xenogears, Shadow Hearts. I wish there was some way to click those, like double click them and it would bring them to the top. But there is no such way. This website really should work better. It is not ready for you to have this many things to tier. And this like can't be hard to do. Just make like a double click moves it to the top function, and your problem solved. Oh, where's Xenogears? I left Xenogears behind. Now it's gone. Oh no. All right. Now I've lost everything. There you are. Okay. So we're moving Xenosaga up. This is very difficult gameplay. Let's keep everything a little closer together. There are 3 Shadow Hearts games, 3 Xenosaga games, and I lost Xenogears somewhere. There you are. Man, this is a challenging game here. And I lost, what did I lose somewhere? I lost Twilight of the Spirits, Arc the Lad. It's just not very good. It's fine. I had a decent time. But it would be, in my 2-star category probably. So, okay, we don't need to find that. Not important. So we will move up our Xenos and our Shadow Hearts. And now we got to pick out the SMT games I've played as well, so we can bring them up. Let's keep it closer to 100. Okay. SMT. Where are you? God, my brain's just. Okay, there we are. We have Nocturne. We have. I've never played 4. I've played Strange Journey. I've played Devil Survivor 1, but not 2. I played the first of the Persona 2s. Played Persona 4. Played Persona 5. Played Persona 3 Portable. We lost track of Persona 3 earlier, but we can discuss that all with Portable. And I like Persona 5 Strikers. I wish that was here on Parasite Eve. I bounced off Ni no Kuni. I love Studio Ghibli, so I thought I'd really like it, and it just didn't click with me at all. Oh, there's Arc the Lab. It's right here. That's great. Uh, yeah, I like Persona 5 Strikers. I wish that was here. All right, let's slowly move these all up the list, and then we'll be done. I'm sure there's RPGs I've played that aren't here or that I missed, but I'm also there are many RPGs here, of course, that I've not touched. Um, that everything there. Yeah, I've never played. Oh, Digital Devil Saga, of course. So hopefully we can keep successfully. How long do we have to? Oh, we're almost there. Wow, great job. So yeah, I'm gonna try to end on a high note because I do tend towards some negativity. So we'll probably go on these from kind of worst to best. But I'll probably stay within a series. So like if I start talking about like Shadow Hearts, I'll do all three of them in a row kind of thing. Okay. So let's get all the remaining ones together. Let's keep things with its series. It's out of order, but that's okay. Where's the other personas? Sorry about this. I blame their website. Nocturne is most similar to Digital Devil Saga, as is Strange Journey. Persona 5, that's important. Is that it? Oh, Xenosaga. Okay. And Persona 3 Portable, perhaps. Is that everything? There's Shadow Hearts 1, 2, and 3 again, but they just double listed them, right? Because there's Shadow Hearts 1, 2, and 3 up here. Yeah, bad job by this, whoever made this list. Anyway, um, okay, where to start? Let's do Arc the Lad. It's just, mediocre RPG. It's fine. Not the end of the world, but like I will never return to it. I got nothing from it lastingly, but it like wasn't bad to do. But I think doesn't make it into the 2.5s, which were like close to being, really appealing. Okay, now where? Let's do Xenosaga. So Xenosaga is the most cutscene heavy RPG ever done, right? I think that holds up. Like at the end of the first dungeon, there's basically an hour of cutscenes where every 15 minutes it gives you a save because it's just going to keep going with cutscenes. This goes from escaping a spaceship to eating curry to being a dick to a guy who has a crush on you to eating curry to like, and then there's this extensive part of like, and Xenogears does this too with the Yggdrasil, but like just run around this ship and try to find someone in an annoyingly laid out ship where it's not at all clear is just like a huge part of the game is being annoyed at having to search this whole area. And the game, what it's trying to do is say, you should like learn this map, basically, right? But the problem is, if the map has nothing in it except like little collectibles, then it is not interesting. It's not like you need to learn the layout of your home base because you need to know where to buy this and where to buy that and where to set up this and where to do that. It's like, no, all that stuff is just in this corner where the save point is. Like, all the stuff you ever need to come back to is there. No, this is purely, we're going to make you run around and find a character for ages and then run around and find a different character. And that's really bad pacing. I think the core problem with Xenosaga is that it's like bad. And I don't mean bad in like I'm annoyed by the frequent cutscenes. I think they're badly paced. I think like they spend a lot of time on stuff they don't need to do. I think it's one of those like the writing is doing different things than the authors think it's doing. Um, and like as an example of this, and this is somewhat spoiling the end of the series, but not a major spoiler to the end of the series. There are two characters that have clearly had a crush on each other the whole time. And slight trigger warning here, just skip 20 seconds. Basically, the series ends with her last words to him as they part being, "Say hi to my rapist for me." Like, what are we doing here? And there's just like lots of moments like that where I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would this be the big moment that you think is important to like have as your big culminating moment? Like, what are you doing? What do you think you've done with this story? Because what you think you've done, I think is just terrible. And it's got a lot of things like that. Xenosaga 3 is pretty universally thought of as the best because it basically they were expecting to do a 6 game arc and then they ran out of money, both because Xenosaga 2 did badly, but also I think just because PlayStation production costs were hard. Um, if you go into the Silent Hill series, there's some stuff there of like Silent Hill 1 did gangbusters, and so they were, hyped to do Silent Hill 2. And Silent Hill 2 did about as well as it could possibly do given its audience, but production for the PS2 was a lot more costly. And with a niche audience, doing a kind of full high quality game like that ended up at best breaking even, and that was doing the best it could do. And people sometimes say Silent Hill 4 didn't do well, and that's what ended the initial Team Silent, but like it's that 2 and 3 couldn't make money and could only lose money despite being like the best things possible in the genre and selling about as well as you could sell in the genre because PS2 production costs were so much higher. And if, you know, they could have done Silent Hill 1 again, it did a lot better because PS1 production costs were way lower. I suspect something similar happened here with Xenosaga, where just the costs surrounding it were so high that it had to do better than it could possibly have done. It had to be Final Fantasy, and it wasn't, um, and so it wasn't gonna last. That said, I think Xenosaga, the best part of Xenosaga for me, is this combat system where there's a constantly every turn. It's turn based. It rotates from the boost chance for a critical hit to extra chance for boost, and boost you can use to skip ahead in the turn order, to extra reward if you kill the enemy on this turn, to blank. And manipulating turns with boost to make sure you get the ones of those you want and the enemies don't is really critical to the gameplay. Some bosses do a neat job of taking advantage of this, or you having to control turns to handle it, I think is really well done. Xenosaga 3 moves off this a little bit, focuses more on boosting, but moves off the rotating boosts thing. And I think it's a little to its detriment. It's clearly the cleanest and like best put together game in the series. But I think it's also like accidentally the evilest. Um, in like having moments like the ones I described above, and that's not the only one. And I also think like it's a series that relies on kind of foreshadowing big grand epic stuff. And for a lot of people Xenosaga 3 pulled it off. And for me it was better at the foreshadowing than showing what was showing its hand. Right? A kind of classic thing with horror of like oftentimes when you actually see the monster, you go, "Oh, that looks silly," and like a lot of it is lost. But till it shows the monster, it's really compelling. And I think you could go, obviously, this has nothing up its sleeve and this is dumb from the start, and that would be a fair reaction. And I think actually, if that was your reaction early, it did have more going on than expected. And so Xenosaga 3 on that front works. But I think in the end, I just think all the games in the series are bad. I think I'd have to get into a lot more specifics than I've been getting into, but I think the writing in its attempts to be deep are actually like not saying interesting things. They're saying bad and not well thought out things. I think the central character arcs, Shion is a bit, while trying to be the kind of, she varies what kind of character the games are trying to be for her, in part because the games strike really different tones. And this is so visually obvious if you look at the graphic change from 1 to 2. But the games really hawk wildly back and forth in tone And that means a character who has a complex arc like Shion is done a real disservice by the jumps in tone that just make her feel like a wildly different character game to game, without it feeling connected. Like, I think FF102 Yuna is pretty defensible, but if you don't, it sort of has that kind of feel, of like, what are we doing? This is not an arc. This is a new character. Um, do I think anyone is well pulled off in those games? Not really. Yeah, we could talk a lot more about that, but I'd have to have looked at them more recently. Xenogears, on the other hand, I am currently watching a Let's Play of, from a channel that mostly does FF7. And it is remarkable how the pacing of that game drops off. I know people point to Disc 2, but no, it's so much sooner. As soon as you hit the prison section, the game is so much less focused and has so much more spacing out of the interesting parts and has so many more of like, now we're in the Thames for a while in a section that does not feel connected to other games. Now we're doing the Billy stuff in a section it's not obvious how it's going to connect. And it eventually does. And I think when it does, it comes together for some pretty good stuff. And I think the first 5-10 hours are really good. But I also think like the game is stricken with pacing issues throughout. And that's the big weakness. Gameplay, I think the mechs just aren't as interesting as the on foot. And it kind of suffers from that. And Xenosaga has a bit of that too, where you have these two forms of gameplay, but one of them is kind of the other, but without many tools, but in a big, cool mech. And if you don't think mechs are big and cool, and I've never been a mech person, then it's just kind of a downer of like, I'm leveling up these things, I'm feeling this progression. Like the whole thing Pokemon does really well is give you this feeling of progression. I'm feeling this progression, and suddenly we jump over to mechs where I just sometimes buy better equips, right? And there is not this feeling of progression, and it just the mech parts always feel like a distraction from the thing. And there's stuff like on the world map, you should be running around in mechs because half the enemies you find are mech enemies and half are human enemies. And the mech enemies you fight are reasonable fights, but I just don't want to be in mechs. And when you get the human enemies, you're like, well, this is stupid. I just step on them and they die. They're not designed for the mech fights. Why am I fighting these in mechs? But if I switched over to humans, I'd have to get back in mechs for the mech parts, and the getting in and out of gear is really clunky in the menuing. And so there's so much many things to the game of just like this needed a lot of quality of life improvements it didn't get. This needed a bunch of pacing fixes it didn't get. Um, this needed a bunch of platforming fixes that you basically need the music because the music will turn off a few seconds when it knows you're going to get in a random encounter. But during that time, if you don't have the music on, you will not know you're about to get a random encounter. But jump gets turned off. So if you're doing platforming, you basically have to make sure you got a random encounter, make sure the music is on, and then go for the jump in areas where when you miss a jump, you have to go redo a bunch. It's just such an unnecessary pain. So clunky and awkward. This is the negatives. The positives, I think, are more in the story and character direction. The story does a lot of the Xenosaga foreshadowing. Obviously, same people, same structure. I think it pulls it off so much better. Now, quick spoilers for the very end of the game. Basically, the end of the game is Hitler goes, "Wow, humanity had some purpose. I want to go find God," and the game like cheerfully sends him off to go find God. Is like, "Yeah, that guy deserves to go meet God." What the hell are we doing here? Something through and through the Xeno series is it reliably cannot identify good from evil when it thinks it does, and cannot identify like who is worthy or not. It is very impressed by power. It will always find power worthy. I do not. I do not think like, it's not a game with kings, but I don't think kings are inherently interesting or meaningful. Kings are bad and should be overthrown because people should have a say in their lives, and kings deny that, right? Kings deny. I'm not even saying like go democracy. I'm saying something bigger than that. I'm saying like go democracy in your life. You should have a say in your life. You should have a say in your workplace. You should be able to have some control over the structure of your life. I want that for you. I want that for everyone, right? And like things that are interested in power should have something to say about the use of power. And the Xenosaga games, incidentally, Zerwildermacht, the will to power is like one of the subtitles, fundamentally never grasps what power is. It's just interested in showing power. And to me, that's weak, right? That's not getting to the actual thing going on. If the end of each of your games is, and Xenosaga's villain is more complex in a sense. Um, Not more complex in the sense that they have a more complex character arc, more complex in the sense that it's not as obvious whether they are evil or not. Whether what they're doing makes sense under a non kind of evil framework. But Xenogears, this is like the worst person ever. There's an interesting arc to get them there, but this is the worst person within the thing, and it sends them off as wow, they were worthy and noble. And it wouldn't do so if they weren't powerful. It's really, it loses everything it tries to hold when it sees power. And I think that's a huge flaw. Um, that said, I think it does some really interesting character work. It basically starts the way many games start, of like intro village is destroyed, which is a way that a game can A, get your character on the move, B, it can give them purpose if their place in the story isn't obvious yet. This gives them a purpose of something to do or something they need to be doing, often revenge. Though in this game, it's more just like the survivors of the village blame you for it, and so you have to leave. But it gives you some reason to be started on your journey, some reason you're not just planted in this place, some inciting event. And it makes sense a lot of RPGs start here. But unlike most RPGs, you are blamed for what happened, and you sort of are partially to blame. You got into a gear, and then something happened. You saw some flashes of something, and you did much of the destruction of the village. And that's an interesting character start. And your character is real mopey after that. Real, this is my fault. I never want to fight again. I don't deserve to live. And they end up having to be convinced that they do need to fight to do things that are worthwhile in this story's universe. But one thing that happens is they meet Ellie, and at this point, you're going back and forth between everything is my fault and desperately not wanting to believe it's your fault that everything you remember and care about has been destroyed. So she says something, and you grasp onto it with, yes, it's not my fault. No, it's their fault. If they hadn't come, this wouldn't have happened. It's their fault. It's not my fault. I'm okay. And like really trying to hold on to that. And she goes, no, you're being a coward. You're not holding up to it. And that kind of breaks our lead character, who then goes back into, yes, I am a coward. It is all my fault mode. But what's interesting here is it is her fault. She was on the gears coming through that set this off. And she says this because she's doing the same thing. She's trying to put blame on another to not have to feel bad about herself. And they are both doing it. And as that becomes clear in the scene, I think it's a really compelling scene. The translation to this game is not very good. A lot of the dialogue is really dumb, and like Xenosaga, hops so quickly from one mode to another, where someone will be like, "We need to have a serious conversation." The other person's like, "I love drinking," and they're like, "That's cool." Like just really weird dissonance. A lot of the time, some of it's translation, but some of it's just weird. Um, and it has the Xenosaga stuff of like explore the ship, finding the person hidden away in a weird corner that won't make any sense. It's got a lot of that, but like it also has this really interesting character work of the characters playing off each other, and the characters often saying stuff that sounds like they're talking about the other person, but really they're talking about themselves. And when we bring in Bart, who is the kind of spunky, I do rash things character that comes in, that's his archetype, he will come in and he will say things to Faye, and they sound like they're about Faye, but they are about Bart. It is a game that does a really good job of character work by having when characters talk, they sound like they're speaking about other things, but they are telling you about themselves, what they want, what they look for, what they need, how they interpret the world. And it does a lot of that, especially in the first 5-10 hours, that's really interesting and compelling character stuff, and I think really well done. Also, it's kind of, ooh, there's a mystery here, I think is better done than in Xenosaga. and that can be off-putting to some people. I think it's pretty well done here, um, and the payoffs are sometimes good. It has the second disc issue that is very famous. That basically they ran out of money and just tell you what happens in like the dungeons you went to rather than you actually doing them. It has a game-ending glitch that ruined my first playthrough of the game in the second disc, where sometimes a block simply will not fall that's needed for a block puzzle, and it ruined my save. I didn't have a save I could go back. It ended my playthrough. It sucked. Um, and that's a big bummer, right? That really hurts your experience with the game. But I think some of the character work is really special and kind of unique. Um, so Faye is a very interesting character. I do not think Jungian psychology is A, accurate, or B, all that interesting, but you don't actually need to be invested in that to find this interesting. I think it pulls off a lot of stuff. I think Xenogears is a really interesting game that's kind of not that good to play because the gear sections are pretty bad. The on foot sections are also not that good. The pacing is all over the place, and I don't just mean Disc 2. I think a lot of Disc 1 has terrible pacing. But there is an ambition here that is sometimes pulled off that you can see glimmers of glory. I understand the people that have Xenogears as like by far the greatest game of all time. And I think I'm going to put it in the 3.5 star section because I think it has enough glimmers of that for me that it means more to me person to person than do the games I put in the 3 star section. But I also could see putting it here. Um, but it feels wrong to put with the 3 star games because the 3 star games I think are games that are basically like, oh yeah, that's a good game. It didn't do anything magical for me, but it also didn't screw up too much. This is a good game. The thing about Xenogears is it's like not quite a good game. The pacing issues are way too severe. The early pacing is excellent. It has so much going on that is kept track of. There's also stuff with its villains where it keeps having little angles on the villains where like a lot of games do the like mwahaha I'm the actual manipulator, but it does it like where like Ramses is a clear villain with a clear attitude towards honor and some other stuff, and then which ends up being expanded on well I think throughout the game and various characters having a history with him and characters in or around your party having been drawn to him and wanting to follow him in the good old days. But then Miang is clearly working with some other villains, and it's not clear where her actual sympathies lie. And then are those other villains, Graf or potentially the Kaiser, are they actually the important ones? And there's a lot of mystery there that is well executed and leaves especially Miang's role in the story very interesting and up in the air of where it's going to go. Um, and so watching someone play it for the first time has been really fun for me. It's been a while since I've played it. And it's always hard for me to go back to because the pacing, both of gameplay and story, really is hard for me to take. I lose steam quick, and when I lose steam, it's tough to get it back. But I also really like bits and pieces. And then I don't like other pieces. There's lots of times it thinks done something, and I think it's focusing on the wrong thing or it's done the wrong thing. And it's a really evocative of strong feelings game. Um, and in the end, I think I value that, but it also has many flaws. And I think a lot of the people that have it like up here uh, do not admit to those very clear flaws. Some do, but oh, it's a very flawed game, but a real ambitious attempt that I value. Vagrant Story. I wish Parasite Eve was here. I like Parasite Eve. Vagrant Story. Another game I think is pretty ambitious despite the actual arc of the story being very narrow. It doesn't quite tell you all the information it should. Basically, you have to leave the game on the intro screen to get some scenes that explain some things and pick up some things here and there that are easy to not pick up. But I think it's like a tight, good story with a small cast of characters that pulls them all off. I think like John Harden ends up being a like pretty compelling character for a side character that doesn't get much attention. Um, a lot of again, a lot of the character work I think is really cleanly well done. Not that it's cleanly done in Xenogears, but is cleanly well done here and can do a lot with a little. Sydney is interesting. Guildenstern's probably the least interesting character, maybe Rosencrantz, but they have a really important part in how they relate to both Sydney and our main character. Um, John Harden, one of the more successful characters in my opinion. Our lead character, Ashley, is one of those very interesting characters. So something FF7 does that's great is it's not that Cloud it has amnesia. It's that Cloud is misremembering because he's remembering what he needs to tell himself. And so he's throughout the game there are revelations where he grasps something new, but he's always holding on to it until we finally get big scenes in the live stream in a way that can tell him what he needs to tell himself to feel good about himself. And Vagrant Story riffs on similar themes there with our lead character and is also very interesting on that front. The problem with Vagrant Story is its gameplay is really clunky, but I really appreciate what it did with the story, and I think I'm actually gonna put that in the 3.5 range as well. Um, Gameplay kind of Parasite Eve like, but I think a bit clunkier. But I think it really goes for something compelling with its characters and story that I want to reward here. Okay, man, I've gone over an hour. All right, I'm gonna be quicker. Valkyrie Profile is great. Valkyrie Profile is fun to play. I think character stuff and Lenneth's arc is compelling and good, starting from a simple character. The little vignettes do get kind of boring for me, and are a little in that sort of sweet saccharine, little contained stories that are trying to tug at the heartstrings but don't have enough time or character to do so. But somehow I love this game anyway, despite it not pulling that off, and despite the fact that the actual story is basically hidden behind stuff you'll only find if you do a guide, because it explicitly tells you to do stuff that if you do, you will not get on the good ending path and you will not get the compelling actual direction of the story. I think Lenneth in the end is really well pulled off. I think the story works. I think the gameplay is fun, and there's a magic to the game for me that really clicks. This is one of those ones that if it doesn't click for you, sure it belongs in this group, but this one clicks for me, so it moves up a lot. Maybe I should have it here, but I think maybe I'll have it here. But I I love Valkyrie Profile. It's great. No, let's have it here. I really like this game. I think it's fun and enjoyable and feels speedy and energetic to play. Unlike Xenogears, the platforming feels good and like is a nice extension of it. And when I beat it on the good ending, I really feel like full as a human. Like I feel like we've experienced something really worthwhile and meaningful in a really fulfilling, valuable way. Okay, Shin Megami Tensei. I played the SMT proper games first. I love the press turn system in Nocturne and Devil Saga. I think it's one of the best kind of strategic make your move decisions systems. Basically, you can pass turns between characters in a really interesting way that lets you maximize your turns and do effective things. It's great. I really enjoy these games. They're just really interesting to play as an experience. Um, I think Digital Devil Saga 1 is better than 2. Another one where I think when it reveals what it has behind the curtain, it is not as good as when it is building up to that. I also think one's narrower story is better pulled off, even if it barely has a story at all. I think it also is a much better reason and feeling behind its characters being sort of one note archetypes, but they are one note archetypes that feel hollow, right? It doesn't feel like they're giving us a full person. And that is very intentional and I think well executed. They have these sort of half people as the characters, and it's supposed to be that, and they pull that off. Now, a lot of that comes from two, but the feeling of it is in one, and I think they pull that feeling off, and I think the gameplay is really interesting. Nocturne is the best game with the press turn system. Um, and I love this system of gameplay. Nocturne is less directed, it's a little less linear in feeling. It also has sort of a Pokemon collect things, but you can also fuse them together. It also doesn't have the regular reward Pokemon has, but you are supposed to be hopping from demon to demon, so it does get that feeling, and that it is a nice feeling. The story is kind of sparse but pretty interesting. It's basically the world has been destroyed, and different people are coming up with different reasons around which we will remake the world, and you have to choose and support one. You cannot come up with a reason yourself. Now, the SMT games are kind of obsessed with the reasons being law or order, very much like alignment chart type stuff, and I've never given a shit about that. This is one that moves a little off that. It doesn't explicitly do law versus chaos, which I appreciate, but it basically fits the same archetypes anyway. It does things that the law versus chaos games do as well. I think the most compelling part of it is certain characters trying for reasons that don't fit into those archetypes, but they are not able to bring those reasons to fruition for various reasons. And you are stuck with reasons that are more singular but less fulfilling and less strong as reasons for various plot reasons. But I think because it's for plot reasons, it pulls that off, where your choices are not great choices. Um, but you don't get to come up with your reason, and the kind of better people in the story trying to construct reasons do not get to pull them off um, in ways that I think are compelling. So I think it works pretty well. I think it's a really interesting game and an interesting story. Strange Journey, I also like. It is on the law and chaos theme, but I think it does interesting stuff with it. It's a little too dungeon crawlery for me. The others are also very much dungeon crawlers, but the 2D grid that it plays on feels so much more dungeon crawlery to me that I think it's a tougher ask. It also does not have the press turn system, but it again does some interesting stuff gameplay wise. It's probably more over here um, on this one. Like it's maybe it belongs here. Let's separate those. Um, but I really like it a lot too. It's a fun game. I enjoy that one as well. Then we get personas. So my first persona was Persona 3. And I was so off put. It felt so weird and creepy to me. And it wasn't even the teenage dating of like some of the characters look like they're four and you clearly sleep with them. That's actually worse in Persona 4, but we're going to ignore that. Like it wasn't even that, though that got to me. It was so many scenes with characters where they're going, "I'm suck and I'm sad," and you go like, "Okay," and they go, "Wow, no one's ever listened to me. You are the greatest person to ever live." And something about your character basically only having dialogue that you choose, so it feels like they're talking to you because your character has no dialogue that is their own that makes their person themselves. It is clearly a self insert option for you, and that you say almost nothing and everyone trips over themselves to tell you how amazing you are felt so like, are the people playing this so desperate for affirmation that this feels good? Because that's what the game feels like it's doing to me. And that felt really creepy and weird and manipulative to me and was really hard to take. I hated all the interactions. They got so much better in 4 and 5. In 4 and 5, it felt so much more like these are characters and they need someone to talk to, and they don't spend all their time telling you how amazing you are. And they don't like it's not near as desperate feeling to me. So for me, Persona 3 ends up being a kind of repugnant game. It's also a lot darker in a way that often does appeal to me, but didn't work for me here. I think the story ends up being really awkwardly paced. And yeah, I think Persona 3 is pretty bad. I think it's bad in a way that like Xenosaga is bad. Like it's bad and I think you are bad. And a lot of times here I've been like, people who like this game, good for you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. These ones I feel kind of weird about people who enjoy them. And I don't mean to be coming at you, but like it's doing something I think is weird and creepy. And if that made you happy, like I feel weird about that. And I'm sorry, I don't know how to do something different. I will say, Persona 3 Portable streamlined the gameplay and I think is significantly better and made it kind of fun to play. And if you skip all the story and just do it for gameplay, it's like complex and difficult gameplay. Persona doesn't quite do the press turn system, but it's a good system. I really had a good time with Portable because I had given up on interacting with the story. And doing that, I think it became a pretty good game and kind of like a Dark Cloud type experience for me. Persona 4 is really good. The actual story is good and well paced. It doesn't take like 8 months to actually get to what it wants to do. It is a well paced story that is an interesting mystery. If you compare the archetypal characters in 3, 4, and 5, all of them in 3 are just flatter and less interesting and meaner than the characters in 4 and 5, though Junsuke sucks in 4. That dude sucks. Um, the homophobia played for laughs is just he sucks. That dude sucks. Um, but 4 and 5 are just so much better versions of the archetypes. And I remember having a long discussion with someone, kind of doing let's rank each archetype between 3, 4, and 5, and just 3 came last, maybe second to last once, because again, is it Junsuke or is it Yusuke? Might be Yusuke. Um, Yusuke Persona 4. No, I don't like Yusuke at all. Sorry. Yusuke is, yeah, no, Yosuke, yeah, in Persona 4. That dude sucks. Who's the one who sucks in Persona 5? It's the blue haired guy. Um, yeah, Yusuke. It's Yosuke and Yusuke. They both suck. They're terrible. Everything else is much better done in Persona 4 and 5, and they are just much better experiences. I think 4 is really good. I don't really like the kind of dating sim, high school sim thing, but Persona 4 actually does it pretty well, so I don't mind it. Persona 4 is just really, really good. Well done. Good mystery, well hidden stuff going on. Um, a likable cast mostly. Some people have problems with kanji. I might be getting the names wrong. It's been a long time since I've played it, but I think Yosuke is the actual problem. Um, I think he's the one who's actually bad. Kanji is just dealing with being unsure of his own masculinity and freaking out and being nasty around that, but it's because he's so uncomfortable with himself. And that's a reasonable story to tell. And I think it's Yosuke who sucks, not Kanji. Um, some of the execution of it I don't like, but okay, good game. And then Persona 5 is so slick and elegant and good and basically doesn't screw up on any of these fronts. And I want to say Nocturne's better because I love the press turn system. Why won't you move? But it's Persona 5, and Persona 5 is the closest to being a 4-star game. And this is a wildly high ranking for a game that spends half its time being a high school simulator, which is just not a space I ever thought I wanted to be. And these games are good enough that it pulls it off. Like, honestly, excellent work. Like, this is somehow not my genre, and it's almost in the 4-star range. Incredible work. Like, great job to Persona 4 and 5. Um, and Persona 5 is so slick and good. My favorite character. Is there anyone I really love from Persona 5? It's my favorite in the series. I used to say I still liked 4 more, and I definitely said I liked Nocturne more for a while, but I think 5 is just the best. I really enjoyed Persona 5 Strikers too. Um, just like really good time. Um, I think my favorite character is Futaba. She amuses me. There have been a lot of characters of that mold, and sometimes they hit for me and sometimes they don't, but she really amused me. I think she works. Yeah. Um, I think the scaling up and the pacing is really good. Uh, okay, the Yusuke section is the weakest and the time when the game's doing the least, but it's okay to have like one dungeon that's not being ambitious and with a bad character. Other than that, great work. Persona 5's great. Well done. That ends Shin Megami Tensei. Oh no, we have Persona 2. So I played Persona 2 after 3 and 4 and before 5, and I just think it's a kind of mean game. I think a lot of the stuff played for laughs is just mean, and I bounced off that pretty hard. Um, yeah, I think the writing is. When I say writing is bad, I don't mean like you put sentences together in an inelegant way. I mean what you think you're saying is different than what I think you're saying, and what you think is interesting and meaningful is different than what I think is interesting and meaningful in ways that are substantial, not just, oh, you're riffing on a topic I've never thought about or been interested in before, but this is compelling work. No, it's you are riffing on a topic I have thoughts about, and I think your thoughts are bad and wrong, right? And Persona 2, I think, ends up kind of going in that mold. I know there are people that think it's really deep, and I didn't get far enough to get there, but I am really skeptical it could pull that off with the quality of thought that was going into that game. I'm very skeptical of Persona 2. I think Persona 4 is the big leap in the series, not 3, not 2, but 4. All right, finally, Shadow Hearts. So let's first of all say Shadow Hearts 3 is a pretty bad game. Let's just throw that here. But Shadow Hearts has a ring system where you basically play a timing game. It's not like Additions, but it's comparable to Additions for each attack that I think is really fun and good and makes for a really functional RPG system. It also shows you the turn order like FF10, and there are ways to manipulate it that's really fun and good. Um, it also uses area of attack location stuff in Shadow Hearts 2 and 3 that I think is pretty good and fun. But the reason I love these games is the story, and it's primarily Yuri Hyuga. People who had worked on the FF games split off, and a lot of the team, I think, was part of the team on FF8. And I think you can feel that Yuri feels a bit like a Squall character. Very in his head, self actualized character that has what you see in his head and what you see out of his head. Now, in Shadow Hearts 1, he starts as a pervy creep. I think the game knows this, and his arc develops from that, right? But he does start as a pervy creep, and he has a growth arc. Um, Shadow Hearts 1 is a game that is not great, but really speaks to me. It's one of those games that really clicks, but I would understand someone being like, yeah, this is. Do I want it bottom four or top? Let's put it here. This is a game that I would rank higher than I think it is good, right? I think it belongs basically with these 3-star games, but it speaks to me because Yuri has ended up being such an important character to me. Like FF8, it's a game where the characters basically, not entirely because there's reasons, plot reasons, but there's reasons where the characters of interactions not through him, but most of the game is very much through his viewpoint and shaped by his viewpoint. Like FF9, Zidane is the lead character, but the whole thing is not shaped through through Zidane's viewpoint. It's shaped through lots of characters' viewpoints. Steiner, Dagger, Vivi are just incredibly huge characters in how you see the world. This is very much you see it through Yuri. But the masterpiece is Shadow Hearts 2, which Yuri is the person he's become at the end of Shadow Hearts 1. I don't know whether to put it first or second. Let's put it tentatively second. Um, Yuri might be my favorite character in RPG history. I think he probably is. We didn't keep up with this because I'm rushing through, but my favorites are probably Yuri, Cloud, Tifa, Barrett a little further down, but Cloud and Tifa are way up there. Um, so probably like Yuri, Tifa, Cloud, uh, Barrett somewhere near the top 10, top 15, Squall, Laguna, Waka, Riku, Orin, Vivi. Frog's not quite this high. I love Lenneth. She's probably not quite this high. I love Zelos. He's probably not quite this high. Yeah, but like Yuri enters that real top tier for me and just at the top of it. Yuri's great. This is a game that I think effortlessly moves from humor to meaning. I think it pulls off both. I love the story and the cast, except for Lucia, who's pointless. But I think the pacing of the story is really good. It moves from thing to thing well. It builds on what Shadow Hearts 1 built. It finds a way to expand on Shadow Hearts 1's story without, for me, denying Shadow Hearts 1's story. It does do a bit of an FF10 too, in part of I was the villain of the last game, but actually there was an even bigger threat just around the corner. But I think it pulls it off by being interesting and introspective in those scenes and thoughtful because it is a game just, for me, dripping with sensibility of like, it knows when it's being funny and it is funny. It knows when it's being thoughtful and it is thoughtful. It is all the things it thinks it's being, and it is pulling off all of them so well for me. Um, yeah, I think Shadow Hearts 2 is a masterpiece. I think Yuri is the best character in video game history. Yuri Hyuga. I think I stand by this. That doesn't mean you love it. Maybe I'll try to play it sometime, like let's play it or something. But for me, this game means the world and was a really special experience. And one I've been getting an itch to replay again sometime soon. So I love Shadow Hearts 2. And thanks for surviving this video with me. Uh, hopefully you weren't too offended by me hating your favorite games or not having played that. I'd love to try the Nippon Ichi games sometime. Let me know if there's something I should dive into that I haven't. On the other hand, if you're like, there's this great game, it's just like Xenosaga, Kingdom Hearts, or a Suikoden or something. Like you should try it. Like maybe that's not to my taste, but I'd love suggestions. It's been a long time since I've found a new RPG I really loved. Um, so the last few years I've played very little of this stuff. Adult, right? Things happen. But I used to spend so much time on this, and now I spend very little. And I would like to spend more time enjoying this kind of stuff. So if you have hot takes of stuff I should try, for instance, like Bravely Default or something like that, do let me know. I would like to know. And again, hopefully I didn't offend anyone too much. Everything from the 2.5 stars up, I've gotten real joy from. Yeah, there's the here's the final list ish, and there you go.